Welcome to the Australian Property Investment Podcast. G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David. I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we specialise in helping property investors start out and scale up their property portfolios. And the centerpiece of that is making good quality, confident property decisions. So that's the premise of why we do this show week in, week out. And we also bring in special guests because they've either been there, done that, and most importantly, they're willing to share their knowledge and their journey as well, which I think is invaluable. Today's guest, I'm sure you're going to be blown away by what he's achieved at a very, very young age. Someone that works with an industry legend in the way of your property, your property empire, is it?
Yeah, your empire, yeah.
Chris Gray. So if you know the name Chris Gray, you know his protege, which is James Brown. Hey, James, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Aaron. Looking forward to it.
Mate, we've got plenty to chat about, but before we do, we were just speaking before, you just finished your corporate fighter event, which is something that I've done in the past, so alumni.
Yes.
How was the training and how did you go?
Hard work, a lot of discipline, turning up to training 4 or 5 times a week.
Yep.
Obviously the fight night, a lot of nerves.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest experiences I've done, definitely. So lots of fun.
Isn't it just like the total analogy on life? And I'm not drawing a long bow here, but you kind of go, mate, you've got to have the right mindset. You've got to have the right training. You've got to have the right diet. You've got to have the right team around you. You've got to have an ability to believe you can win. You've got to have the right support network as well. Put in the work. There's no shortcuts to jumping in the ring. You've actually got to do the work technically, but also mentally as well, right? So
absolutely. It's all those things. It's the same for anything, business, sport, for people that play sport. It's the same thing. So a very valuable experience, not just because of, I learned how to box and got myself pretty fit, but I think you can carry those skills into other areas, which is very important as well.
Well said. That investment, whether you choose to do something like that, whether you choose to do a personal investment seminar, workshop, whatever it is, any person in my chats that I've had, and I'm really fortunate to have these chats in the podcast, anyone that's gone to achieve success, particularly in property, has done some level of self-development. They've invested the time, the energy in themselves. And I believe that's where your own kind of journey started, which is you want to get into property. You've had a chat to Chris. He's like, go and do a course, come back, have a chat to me. You've gone and done that. You're like, hey, mate, I've done the course. Now what? And it's like, I'll work for you for free. That's almost music to every business owner's ears, which is I've got someone that's young, hungry, ambitious that wants to work for me for free. But then you've kind of gone the next step, which is you've proven that you've got runs on the board. You've taken action yourself, which is gone and buy your own property, for example. And now you've got this ultimate apprenticeship under Chris. And we'll talk about it in a second, but kind of go back in your journey. Take us through the James Brown story, mate. You're a young bloke. You've already got a book here. And you bought properties yourself. So, mate, as we unpack your story, there's a lot to get through, but take us through in your own words, mate, how this journey's unfolded for yourself.
Yeah, so I guess it started when I finished school. So I finished school in 2018. I'm now 23 years old.
Yep.
So finishing school, I was like everyone else. What do I do? Do I go to university? Do I, do I do a trade? Do I try and get a job? But one thing is I always knew I wanted to invest in property. I wanted to build my wealth. I wanted to ensure that I could set myself up financially for the future.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did was obviously educated myself. A lot of that was watching YouTube videos, reading books. Chris Gray, as you mentioned, he was a host of Sky Business News.
Yeah.
He had a TV show for property on there. So I just reached out to him. He actually gave me a call, or I gave him a call, and he said, one of my friends is doing running a property course. It starts the next day, a 3-day course. I think it cost me maybe $3,000 or $4,000. He's like, if you can go and do that, we can catch up for coffee afterwards and go from there. And I thought, $3,000 or $4,000 is a lot of money for an 18-year-old kid. I might have had, say, $10,000 at the time or whatever it was. But I did do that, made the decision quite quickly, did the course, had coffee with Chris, essentially then started working for him part-time 1 day a week, offered to work for free for a period of time, which worked well. But then that transitioned to working part-time for him whilst I was doing other jobs as well at the time.
Isn't that incredible, mate? It's the power of taking action, right? Like if you probably had more time, you might have convinced yourself not to.
Definitely.
Like I'm going to give 33% of my savings on a course which no guaranteed outcome. But you almost got a gun to your head and you go, well, I've got to make a decision within 24 hours to embark on this journey. And you've just gone, yep.
And yeah, it's literally like that. Yeah. I think if I had more time to think about it, you would have come up with an excuse. And
Right.
it's the same for anything. There's always a reason not to do something,
Yeah.
with investing. But yeah, absolutely.
Well done. So as a young guy, 18, for example, what were those trade-offs in life? 10 grand, you could have gone traveling, for example. You chose to put that into a course and then ultimately study. Was there part of a greater plan here, or are we just going to kind of build a plan as we're flying it? Take me through your decision-making.
Yeah, so at that time I was obviously working part-time for Chris, maybe 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
I was studying university,
Yeah.
full-time technically, but as everyone knows, that's usually only 1 or 2 days a week. You do it at night, however that works in with your schedule. I was working at a pub, again, a few days a week, doing labouring for my dad. He's a builder.
Okay.
So doing that a couple of days a week.
Yeah.
Rugby coaching, cricket coaching, all these different part-time jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was obviously to get that deposit, but also get that servicing to a point that, I could buy a property.
Well done.
But it was a lot of hard work. You're working to the pub until maybe 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Rugby coaching at 5 or 6, or probably up at 5 a.m. to be there at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that. But again, I only had to do it for a year or two.
Yeah.
I didn't do any traveling. So again, I've only gone overseas twice.
Yeah.
I think when I was about 15, I went on a cricket tour.
Yeah.
And then last year I went to Bali for a few days.
Well done.
So I haven't done the Europe gap year. But I guess, that is that trade-off that you just spoke about.
And I think even in here, when I was flicking through the book, Tim Gurner's comment, I bought property, but I wasn't spending $14 on avocado and toast and $4 coffees. There is sacrifices. I think everyone that I've had a chat to in the podcast, Trinity in our team, had a chat with Eddie, another client, for example, it's the same thing. I've had to give something to get something, as opposed to I'm going to have it all and buy property as well. Like, there's something that's got to give.
Absolutely. It's that delayed gratification.
Yeah, nice. Europe, I say, mate, Europe will always be there. America will always be there, mate. And when you got more money, you can enjoy it more.
That's right. That's right.
That's how I look at it. You can backpack your way around it. Sure, that's a great way to do it. And it's an economical way to do it. However, you could stay in Airbnbs or hotels and enjoy it a little bit more as well.
And that was the exact thought process at the time, was I can go to Europe now on a budget of $10,000 for a few months, or a couple of months. I don't know how long $10,000 lasts, but
inflation, mate, it'll probably last you about 2 weeks, I reckon.
Probably now, yeah. But that's the whole thing. Whereas now, if I do it all in a year or two, I can enjoy it a bit more and don't have that stress about it. So,
and you're probably back to that stage. So you're not going, look, in the back of your mind, I'm like, I'm spending this money. It could go towards a deposit. It's almost eating away at your enjoyment, for example, or someone's in your ear, maybe a parent going, that's silly money. You could be spending that on a house, and instead you're going to Europe. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. All I'm saying is you've got decisions to make when you've got finite resources, and you've chosen to make this decision, and you're going to be the beneficiary off the back of that.
Well, you've got to look at what you value and what you care about. For me at that time, that's what I valued, was finances, building a bit of a business, obviously that whole wealth creation thing. But some people who love traveling, travel. If you want to go hang out with your mates, go do that. Yeah. I think it's different for everybody, but you just got to understand what works for you and what you care about, and I guess go down that track.
Mate, well said, well said. So why don't we start with your first property? Because I understand timing-wise, we're talking probably the start of COVID.
Yes.
We're talking co-purchasing, for example, with your cousin, and then you're buying a unit, which is a one-bedder. And so people are going, hang on, timing's COVID, which that's a ballsy decision. Co-purchasing with a relative, okay, that's another grey area or a big decision to make. And then buying a unit, for example, where most people say, go and buy land. So take me through this decision to buy your first, and how does this all kind of unfold for you, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you just mentioned, I bought my first property with a cousin who's also quite a close mate of mine. We're, 2 or 3 weeks apart in age.
Beautiful.
So growing up together, played sport together, school together, all these different things. And my whole thing was, after working all these part-time jobs, for a year or 18 months, however long it was, I couldn't get that servicing or that deposit to purchase something in what we consider a blue chip area, and that's aligned a lot with Chris's strategy.
Yeah. So why not go somewhere cheap? Like, I'm purely not. I love what you've done. So but someone would go, well, why not go somewhere cheaper out in the sticks somewhere?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. So and a lot of this comes back to having a good team around you, having a good bunch of mentors.
Yep.
And my whole thing after listening to Chris and speaking to him was, get yourself into as good of a spot or as good a location as possible, especially whilst you're young, because you've got time for that capital growth to essentially build your wealth. Yeah. So generally speaking, there's 2 plays in property, or there's a lot of plays you can develop and renovate, but generally speaking, you're either going to have capital growth or rental yield. it's very rare for you to have both those that are sustainable over a long time.
Well said.
And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but you're generally speaking going to have one or the other. And I think different people need different strategies. You know, if you're a younger person, high disposable income, you can sort of carry those costs of holding that blue chip asset that's going to perform, you know, or grow in capital over time. Yeah. That works well for them. But again, if you're maybe someone in their 60s or 70s who, you know, that $1 million property going to 2 million isn't as important as getting cash flow in every week.
Yes.
So it's just about understanding the person and what works for them.
Yeah.
So for me at that time, it was, how can I turn that, say $350,000 or $400,000 that I could afford? How can I turn that into $800,000 and continue to build that? Because again, an extra couple $100, you know, a week in my pocket or whatever that would be on a cash flow or high yield strategy, that's not really going to change my life.
I love it.
Chances are I'd spend it anyway, you know.
I love that you say that, because quite often I'll speak to people and they're earning six figures and they're like chasing yield and cash flow for the extra, I don't know, $80 a week. I was like, mate, you're earning 100 grand. What are you worried about the extra $80 a week? Now it might help from a serviceability component. But if that property is not increasing, you can't pull the equity out. You're what I call the frustrated investor, which is you've got borrowing capacity, now you're lacking equity, so you maybe have to rely on savings to try and buy the next investment property. Whereas what you're saying is, why doesn't the property do the heavy lifting in terms of its growth for me, then go and buy the next one as well, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, well done.
And that's the generational wealth you want to build. And like you said, you know, someone who's on six figures, extra $80 or $100 a week or whatever it turns out to be in their pocket, the chances are you're just going to spend that. And it's the same as when people's incomes go up.
Yeah,
it's very much, it's very easy to, instead of have the $50 dinner, you have the $100 dinner, which then goes to the $200 dinner.
I'm glad you say that. Yeah, you'll spend your pay rise before you actually materializes. I mean, when my lifestyle was 50K, when I earned 50K, my lifestyle was 50K. When I earned 100K, my lifestyle was 100K. When it's 200, it's scaled lifestyle. So as your income grows, you know, there's a nicer bottle of wine at dinner time and the restaurants aren't the local cheap Thai place. It's somewhere nicer, right? Yeah. So I think lifestyle creep is a real thing. And we speak about the holidays get better, for example, the cars get better. So it can find a way to spend. I was just reading Atomic Habits. I'm gonna butcher the name, but like it's the Deirdre effect or something. I'm not sure if you read it.
I've read the book, yeah.
Yeah, so it just talks about how when you buy something new for your house, now that's brand new, that looks out of place. Then you need something else. You need the new countertop to go with it. Now it looks out of place. You need the new furniture to go with it. And that's why I think there's a stat that when you buy a new home, 60% of people will buy a brand new car within 6 months.
Really?
Yeah. So just watch and observe that. So if anyone's listening and it's you bought a new house, now the car looks out of place because it's not new and shiny.
There's always that next thing.
Yeah, right.
Always that next thing.
I think, to your point, you're spot on around that. Is that really going to turn the dial on your financial plans, or is the capital growth more important?
But then again, for someone who's in their 60s or 70s or someone who's got a family, they've got lower sort of income, and that maybe extra $100 a week helps them. And that's where there's no one right strategy for everybody. And I think that's important to remember too.
Yeah. Well, so your strategy, take me through what was the kind of the blueprint for your strategy under Chris's leadership and you and your cousin? How does that work?
Yeah. So essentially with that property, so we purchased 1-bedroom unit in Vaucluse.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, like I said before, was I couldn't afford to get in there by myself. Yeah. Neither could he. He was working full-time in the army. Obviously, I had multiple jobs at the time that was putting together all my servicing and deposit and all those fun things.
Yeah.
And basically, I went to him and said, let's do this. And he was quite keen. He'd been saving for quite a while to buy a property.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We bought that property for $750,000. I actually had that valued the other day at $985,000.
Mate, well done.
It's, what's that been? Probably just under 3 years probably just under 3 years, and it's gone up, what's that, 235,000 or something.
So that 235, you split the equity in half, for example, and you're talking about 100 and what are we talking?
15,000 or whatever it is. Something
right,
like that,
120,000, for example. I'm going to dare say you probably couldn't save 120,000 over 2 years, right? No. 2 to 3 years. Yeah, well done. Well done. Excellent. So then that property increase has then been able to help you buy your next one as well?
Yeah, so a lot of what happened then with the next one was all of a sudden I'm, say, 20 years old.
Yep.
I've got a property under my belt in Vaucluse and it brings a lot of credibility and a lot of, a bit of media attention, that sort of thing. So what I happened to do then was transitioned into more of a full-time buyer's agent role with Chris.
Excellent. Yep.
I could bring a lot more value to the team because I had experience. I
Yep.
had property at 20 years old.
Yeah.
And then what happened was my income increased quite significantly,
Yep.
which then helped servicing, deposit, all these different things for the next one.
Beautiful.
So probably, again, maybe 12, 18 months later, purchased my second property. This
Yeah.
one was by myself. This was another one-bedroom unit in Cremorne.
Yeah.
Paid $770,000 for that one. So again, that just helped my brand, helped my business, which then in turn helped me purchase more property.
Well done. And I guess most people go, oh, why like a one better? Why not a two better? Obviously, you're constrained by your income, your age, deposit, for example, asset selection. So are we going buy in a good area, and that will kind of that blue chip wealth effect is then going to rub off into that growth? Did you buy the right unit in the right block, for example, on the right street? Like, take me through, because not all one betters are created equally, right?
Absolutely.
Does it come with parking, for example? Like, what separates your one better from maybe the other one betters in the area?
So the strategy we implement for our clients and that we implement for ourselves as well is very simple. A lot of people overthink these sorts of things.
Of course they
basically
because it's a big decision.
It's
right?
a big decision,
Yeah.
but it's really simple, and it's hard to not overthink these sorts of things.
Correct.
As you said.
Correct.
But it's very simple. Basically, the driver of price growth in any market is supply and demand. Doesn't matter if it's stocks, property, anything.
Yeah.
When you've got a low supply of something, you've got a high demand. That's what pushes prices up.
Okay.
So in these areas that we buy in Sydney, I'll use Bondi Beach as an example.
Yeah.
A lot of heritage, a lot of conservation, a lot of 3-story height limits.
Yes.
They're never going to build a 50-story building on Bondi Beach because the locals aren't going to be happy about it.
Correct.
So there's automatically it's fully built out, and there's that limit of supply.
Yeah.
Now on the demand side, it's close to the CBD but not in it. So all the young professionals who want to rent these things on high disposable incomes, they can afford to rent there.
Yeah.
And it's near the beach, near the pubs, restaurants, and everything. So
And Bondi Beach just isn't going to go out of fashion, is it?
No, or I don't think so.
No. You'd struggle to find something more iconic as well, right? Sydney coastline. But yeah, keep going.
But yeah, so in Sydney, it's really that lower North Shore, parts of the inner west and the eastern suburbs.
Yeah.
And it's just looking for those areas where they're not going to be building these big buildings, and there's going to be that influx of supply.
Right.
So you think Mossman's another example, or Neutral Bay. And look, every now and then there might be a little one go up, but you're not going to have a massive influx of supply.
Yeah, because I've seen one of your videos. I'm going to say, not Artarmon.
Chatswood.
Chatswood.
Yes.
That's right. I mean, they just keep building these. It's like Hurstville, for example, is that in those areas. Parramatta's another one that comes to mind where they can just keep building. They've got obviously the land, but they've got these abilities just to keep building these ginormous. I mean, Zetland.
Absolutely.
You got to think the banks then have postcode restrictions or height restrictions, so automatically you're getting met with almost a marker that the banks don't particularly love them. They're pitched to investors that don't really have that. They're not the investment grade, for example, so they're renting, churning, burning. They're going through them, the wear and tear sometimes on it, and then the strata adds up. So take me through your one betters. Are they in smaller complexes, for example, and the age and kind of, is there renovation potential? What have you done on your ones?
Yep. So the first thing is obviously location, which we've spoken about. And then the next thing is what's the actual asset that you're buying.
Okay.
So everything that we want to be buying is small boutique block of units.
Yep.
We don't want to be in one of those high rises like you mentioned.
Okay.
None of those Meriton buildings or anything that's massive.
Yeah.
The thing with that is, first of all, generally speaking, you've got higher strata fees in bigger buildings. You've got lifts, gyms, pools, saunas. Beautiful gardens. Yeah. But that doesn't help us as investors.
Yeah.
So higher strata fees aren't great. The other thing is essentially when you buy a strata titled property, you're obviously buying the unit itself.
Yeah.
But in one regard, you're also technically or essentially buying the land that unit sits on.
Yeah.
So when you're in a smaller boutique block of units, you're essentially owning a larger portion of that land.
Nice one. Yep.
It's a land that goes up in value.
Correct.
Buildings depreciate, lands go up.
Yep.
So owning a larger portion of that land over the long term is generally speaking going to be better. We want everything we want to be buying. We want to have parking. So when you look at investment properties, you've got A grade properties, B grade properties, and I guess C grade properties.
Okay.
All those properties in the good times rent well, they all sell well. You don't have any issues even you're in a good area. But it's in when you have the market downturns, that the B and C grade properties struggle, but the A grade properties in the good areas will still perform well. So parking, natural light, practical floor plan, good space, good size, all those sorts of things are important.
So you could still have an ABC property, one bedders, or let's isolate your example. One bedders in Vaucluse, you could still have ABCs on the one bedders, right? So your C's are like on the main road. No parking, for example, bigger block.
Yes.
And then the B's would be maybe parking, poor aspect or noisy, bad layout that you can't really change. And then your A grade's kind of what you've then gone on to purchase.
Yes.
So take me through what's your filtering mechanism on A grade properties. What did that look like for you?
A lot of it is actually dependent on, you got to look at what people want. So if you go to an open home, and a lot of what we want to buy is off market, so you don't have that competition.
Right.
But if you are in the market, go to the open homes, see what a lot of people like. If there's a lot of people at one particular open home, generally speaking, the characteristics of that property means it's a good property. If you go to another open home or another property that has been on the market for 3 months, no one's bought it, no one's turning up to the open homes, observe what the difference is between that property and the other one, and that's what you should be looking for.
Nice one.
So look for demand.
I think it's almost contrary thinking, because most people go, that one's been on the market for a while, it's not moving, I can negotiate and sell it, buy it well, and and it's almost the other way, where you want to go where the herd's going to go. That's the one that's in demand, because a lot of people are gravitating to this type of property because it ticks a lot of boxes. Maybe it's the style, maybe it's the layout that's attracting people as well,
or the feel of it. Some properties just feel good, and everyone gets that same feel. But
it's got a view, wonderful view, for example, as well.
But it's well said, because you got to remember, if you're buying a bargain now, the things that make that a bargain today, whatever those fundamentals are, they're not really going to change in 20 years' time if you go to sell that. So then you're going to have to sell for a bargain. I'd much prefer pay a fair price for a good property now and then get a fair price, or look, our strategy is to never really sell, but I'd prefer do that than get a bargain on a poor property. Because it's going to not perform as well.
Mate, well said. Thanks very much. And I guess to go back to one part, you're young, borrowing capacity, then trying to nail that component, because this is probably the worst time of your life when you're trying to 18, sub 20, for example, is the lowest you're probably ever going to earn in your lifetime. So take me through, how did you then unlock the borrowing capacity piece and the deposit piece for if we've got someone young listening, mate?
Yeah, a lot of people think the deposit is the hardest bit. And I agree, it is difficult, but servicing, especially when you're young, is very difficult. So one thing that I say to people, and I speak to a lot of younger people about property, that is, you have to invest in your skill set. You have to invest in your business, your career, whatever it is that's going to increase your income.
Well said.
Because your income is directly correlated to essentially how much you can borrow from the bank. And that directly correlates into how big of a portfolio you can build.
Mate, well said. That is not the first time I've heard that today either.
Oh, okay, good.
Good. So I guess being able to turn the dial, like there's only so much. The biggest shame for investors is when they've got equity and they can't access it because they don't have the borrowing capacity to pull out that equity. And so they can see it, they just can't touch it. And it's like it's teasing them almost. And what you're saying is, well, you can turn the dial personally on your own income potential, and that's going to give you a greater uplift. And investing in yourself, I'd say, is people think investing in property is their greatest asset. It's like invest in yourself, and that's going to give you far better 100% as well.
I think you need to invest in both. At the moment, I'm investing a lot in marketing, business, all those sorts of things, because I'm at a cap servicing wise. So you gotta keep doing that, because otherwise you're not going to be able to buy any property. It goes hand in hand. Invest in your business, gets you more property. Property goes up, then increases can increase your income, because I guess in my circumstances increases my brand and everything like that. So it all goes hand in hand. Yeah,
perfect. Well said, mate. And then and you've got someone in your corner like Chris. So not everyone's fortunate to have someone like Chris, but you can obviously access Chris through his videos. He puts out some great content, for example. What does the rest of your team look like? So you're obviously co-purchasing with your cousin. So you guys need to get on the same page as well. The rest of your team, what does that look like in terms of where they're supporters, where they're detractors, and who's on the journey with you guys?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I've had a lot of good people around me. Obviously, the guys at Empire that I've worked with, there's a number there. I've invested a lot in sort of communicating effectively. I had like a coach for a period of time.
Well done.
She was very good, and all those sorts of people help that support network, help with those sorts of things. But I guess you're always going to have those detractors. And like you mentioned, when I purchased that first property in sort of the beginning of COVID, a lot of people saying, don't do it now. You're crazy. The world's falling apart.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I'd be lying if I said whether I knew whether the world was falling apart or not. But I think you've just got to make a decision, go with it, because what I found is the same people that were saying when I purchased my first property to not buy, that they were the exact same people when I purchased my second property. They were saying, no, don't buy. And their reason then was, it's the top of the market. You're crazy to buy now.
Yeah.
So for those people, or if I took those people's advice, I'd never be buying, you'd never be doing anything.
Yeah, that's correct, isn't it? And we'll get this often, maybe it's family, maybe it's a loved one, for example. It comes from a place of protection, or it comes from a place of we're trying to help you not make bad decisions. But ultimately, I have a rule. It's no pay, no say. So if you're not paying my mortgage, you don't get to say what decisions. And it's not, what's the word? It's not arrogant. It's just going, hey, look, this is something that I'm going to have to live with. If it's a good decision or a bad decision, the consequences are mine, because effectively I'm paying this mortgage, right?
Definitely.
So, and I think sometimes people can take those detractors to heart versus the amount of times you talk to your Chris's of the world, you talk to any of the buyers agents that have gone on to build high caliber, big investment property portfolios. They bought at some bad times. Back in hindsight, they were bad times in technically speaking in the market to be buying, but that didn't stop them.
Exactly. I think on that, when you're getting advice from people, especially for younger people, everyone wants to give you advice. They all want to be part of your success, which is a good thing, and it comes from a good place.
Yeah.
But it can get you confused. It's very easy. You got the media saying one thing, you got friends, family, the bus driver, the guy on the golf course. You got all these different people saying different things. So my advice to them is listen to it all, but then filter it all very quickly.
Nice one.
Don't let it all sit in your head, because you're just not going to make a decision.
Yeah.
Write it all down. Have a few people that you're really good advisors that you respect and you trust, but then also understand that their advice is coming from their place.
Correct.
And that's based on their experiences. Their experiences is completely different to yours.
Yeah.
So you just got to understand why they're giving that advice.
Yeah.
And then see, I guess, how that works in with your situation.
Well said. You mentioned just be able to write it all down and get out of your head. Definitely. Something that you've done very, very well. So I'm not not plugging your book, but if you're watching us on the video, you'll be able to see it here. Mate, I was flicking through it before, and just some of the stuff that you've pulled out. For example, I know it talks about your journey, but there's a great quote. I think it's Mark Twain. Sorry, man, I'm just going to jump to it. I think I saw it here. Buy land, and they're not making any more. Like you've got these like golden quotes in here that go hand in hand with, I guess, the reasons to buy property. For example, I often say this country, like there's a reason why people want to come and live in this country. Migration's at somewhere like 400,000. It's an attractive place to live, right? Like this, I've just got back from Thailand, and if I was to live there, I couldn't buy real estate in that country. I'd need to buy with a local. Someone can come to this country and buy property as soon as they're like on PR, for example. Like this country welcomes people open arms, and the ability to buy property. Look at what you've been able to do. Like you're creating intergenerational wealth at such a young age purely by making a few good decisions, and the government gives people incentives to buy their first property. Like there's not many countries in the world where you're incentivized to buy and given a leg up. So mate, I want to say kudos to you for being able to put pen to paper. I know this is a lot of hard work that goes into writing and bearing your soul. So take us through what inspired the journey to write your book. It's called The Rookie Investor, and I just hit up James to get a couple of copies, so we'll give away a few copies on the book. But take me through what's inspired the journey, and what can readers expect from your book as well?
Well, I think a lot of it was, obviously I do a lot of content I put a lot of content out on my social media, Instagram, TikTok, those sorts of things. And with that is I have a lot of people asking me questions. And what I realized after a period of time was a lot of the questions are the same questions.
Yes.
And it's the things that everyone wants to know.
Yeah.
And I just one day sat there and started typing out on a Word doc, thought I'll write a book. And at that time, I guess I didn't really know whether or not it would eventuate, but it continually just kept evolving. And I had the book. So I guess the whole purpose behind it is try and add as much value to anyone that's looking to get into the market, where it's younger people, older people. it details my story, but there's also a lot of tips there for, the process, because
Well done.
I remember when I purchased my first one, and it's easy to forget this now that I buy a lot of properties, but there's so many things that you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know what a 66W is. You wouldn't know, even with the finance approval, there's so many things there that you have to get right.
Yeah.
And I think something like that, it's probably only a 60 to 90 minute read.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good for people who haven't bought property before and they want to.
Well said, mate. You're spot on. And I think the idea of like having something tangible, for example, and being able to absorb information. You talked about frequently asked questions. That's exactly how this podcast started.
Really?
Which was, I'm getting the same question, and I'm having these conversations one-on-one, but sometimes because we're coming at our own clients with a lot of information on what they can retain or their ability to retain. It's like if I was going to go to the optometrist and they started rattling off all this stuff about my eyes, I'd be like, I'm only catching maybe a third of what you're saying here. And so that's why these mediums, I think, work, whether it's read, think, do, listen, depending on your style of learning, you're going to resonate with one or those. For example, like people can listen to this podcast at 1.5 times. I wouldn't be able to keep up, for example, or a YouTube video at 2 times speed. But so if it's a book that you kind of absorb information, you want to get a copy, please feel free to reach out to us. And we've got ebooks that are going to be helpful to give away as well, mate. So I want to say thank you very much for sharing your story. I know it takes a lot. When you mentioned that, the media kind of caught wind in your story, it can almost take, I won't say take the wind out of your sails, but there's plenty of people that were kind of negative about a young guy that's been able to buy real estate and then go on to scale up. And, that goes against the grain of what young people are doing. But to that point, that's the whole reason why this is a great story, because it does go against the grain, but it also shows that it is possible. When we talk about the first home buyer age being in the high 30s, we need to change the conversation, mate. Right? Like we need to reframe the way that you buy property, and it's not that it's not hard, it's just possible.
It's like what you said before. There's no other country or not really any other countries that I'm aware of that first home buyers get as much of a leg up as what they do in Australia.
Yeah. And yet we want the government to do more. I'm like, the government's trying, mate. They're going 5% deposits with no mortgage insurance.
You think 5% on a, it's a very, what are you going to spend in Europe for a gap year, 20 or 30 grand? I mean, I'm not sure, but that's almost a 5% deposit on a half decent property. Yeah. So it's definitely possible. It's definitely achievable. But it's like you said at the beginning, it's that trade-off and working out what you want to do and, not making those excuses, because it certainly is possible. Yeah, correct. I want to say thanks very much. So if that kind of resonates with you, or it's challenged you a little bit to reframe the way that you think, I'd love for you to reach out to us, drop us a question. If you've got James, a question for James, active on socials, so check him out. We'll include links to all your social platforms as well, and the details to you and your team over at Your Property Empire as well. But I want to say thank you very much for your energy. I love when people come on and share their stories as well, because I think that's powerful. It's obviously a lot to bear your soul and talk about your journey, mate, but people get a lot out of that. So thank you very much. That's right. Thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed the conversation. I love it. And say hi to Chris. Chris was, we'll include the details. Chris was one of the first to come on. I know, you're telling. Yeah. I think back, it was terrible. I look at the great studio that we've got up here in North Sydney. That was a co-working space in Chippendale. Ask Chris. It was a co-working space in Chippendale, and I didn't even have the right plugs and the right cords and everything. It was so bad. And yet he just smiled right through it, mate. And it's the type of bloke that he is. So, yeah, no, he's a great guy. He's been on the journey doing this podcast and seeing you guys grow as well, mate. So testament to you. Well done. I look forward to seeing the next round, mate. What's in store in the future for yourself as well. Well done. Thank you. Beautiful. That's another wrap. That's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. If you've loved it and you want to give us a review, we'd love that. But even better, if you've got some questions, please feel free to drop us a line and keep the show going as well. And to all the support and all the feedback that we get, a heartfelt thank you very much for your time and your ears as well. That's a wrap, and we'll talk to you next time.